There are two core teams for Assassin's Creed right now, according to Chief Creative Officer Serge, so one of the higher ups, the big bosses at Ubisoft, in an interview with Game Informer in October 2018. We got one in Montreal that made Black Flag, recently Origins, and that is now working on the rumored Assassin's Creed Vikings game that will likely launch alongside the next consoles in the fall of 2020. And there should also be a core team in Quebec that made Assassin's Creed Syndicate, then Odyssey, and is now working on Gods and Monsters. Wait, that doesn't really make sense. Then who is making the next Assassin's Creed after the Viking one is released? Well, I got an idea, it's an interesting one, so let's get into it. Would be awesome if you could leave a like on the video, as it shows your support, and let's go. I already made a Gods and Monsters video going over the things we know about that new open world action light RPG that will be coming out on February 25th, 2020. So quite soon after the launch of Odyssey, that of course came out in early October 2018. So immediately after that launch, the creative director and game director and actually a ton of other people from the Odyssey team went to work on this new IP. Some stayed on Odyssey though. We of course have the Atlantis DLC team that should now be joining Gods and Monsters as well, since the final episode is about to release on July 16th. But yeah, all in all, there are 300 people at Ubisoft Quebec and 300 people from around the world making Gods and Monsters. And on the official website from Ubisoft Quebec, they note that they have around the 484 employees there. So yes, most of the people that are at Ubisoft Quebec are working on Gods and Monsters, but there's still a pretty sizable group of people working on something else. At the end of 2018, Ubisoft Quebec announced some very exciting news, namely that Mike Laidlaw has joined the studio. He was a leader, or as he likes to call it, led the design team and owned the core franchise vision for all the Dragon Age games. So yes, this is a big deal. He has been one of the key figures behind the successful Dragon Age franchise. I really liked Origins myself, mostly thanks to the very well done stories, a lot of the choices and consequences, and that's actually very similar to the direction that Assassin's Creed is going in after Odyssey. Mike Laidlaw joined Ubisoft Quebec in December 2018 to become a creative director on an unannounced project that is still unannounced at this point. So it's not Gods and Monsters. I mean, we already have Jonathan Dumont as a creative director on that game, and two creative directors on the same game in the same building, I don't think that that would work. And Mike also did not tweet about the game at all during E3 while he was at the Ubisoft show. He did actually retweet a Ubisoft E3 announcement though, and that was for the Story Creator mode, a new feature coming to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But wait, it gets even more interesting. Kotaku published an article about the past and the future of the Dragon Age series, talking about how Mike Laidlaw left BioWare after the reboot of the already in development Dragon Age 4, codenamed Joplin. So thanks to troubled development of Mass Effect Andromeda and of course Anthem, things did not really go well at BioWare obviously, but there was also this issue that Dragon Age 4 or Joplin did not have a live service component, so it did not really fit the EA mantra of having a game that would last longer after the release, according to this Kotaku article. So Joplin was cancelled, but BioWare is now working on another version of Dragon Age 4 called Morrison, although it's unclear if the vision from Joplin still remains. I would say no, because Mike Laidlaw, the creative director on Joplin, left. So Mike Laidlaw was likely not happy that the game he spent a few years working on was cancelled and that he had to start from scratch. So instead of like continuing at BioWare, he left and spent a year consulting different developers on different games, like helping them out, giving them guidance, and he also helped a specific team at Ubisoft Quebec, the Odyssey team, during the development, and he was really impressed by the combination of passion and raw talent in the studio, and this is from his LinkedIn article telling everyone why he joined Ubisoft Quebec. If you played Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was principally developed here at Ubisoft Quebec, then you already have some taste of what that combination can produce. He continues that he cannot discuss what he will be doing, but he will say that it's exciting enough to make me move halfway across the continent. And I would argue that being the creative director on the big new Assassin's Creed is exciting enough to make you move and to join this studio. So if it wasn't obvious already, I think that Mike Laidlaw is the creative director on the next Assassin's Creed that we will see after Assassin's Creed Kingdom, so the Viking game from Ubisoft Montreal. And if that is true, then it tells us of course a lot about the direction that the franchise is going in. I mean, you're not hiring an RPG veteran to make a non-RPG game without any branching dialogue. Ubisoft has said many times that they're very happy with the franchise right now, with record playtime from all the players. I think it works for Assassin's Creed, as was shown in Origins, and then improved on in Odyssey. But totally, after playing Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered this year, I get reminded of what Assassin's Creed can be as well, with way more focus on the cinematic storytelling part via a ton of high quality cutscenes that in Odyssey only actually appear at the beginning and at the end of the main campaign. And if the games are only getting bigger and bigger, and that's the direction that they seem to go in, then I think that is also the way forward for the series in terms of storytelling. But there's a way bigger picture here that I want to touch on briefly, because it looks like every Ubisoft game is going in an RPG direction. I listened to the Ubisoft financial meeting that they had in May, where they mentioned that RPG games simply have a way greater impact on their global reach, with more opportunities as well. And they're of course also talking about reaching the Chinese market. That market is huge and mostly untouched by Ubisoft, but also the PC market that is simply way more a fan of RPG games, and according to Ubisoft the PC players are way more engaged. So having them on board will be very important to them. And with more engaged, they obviously mean that they are playing the games for longer, but then also likely paying more after the fact for DLC and microtransactions. It will be interesting to watch this trend in the future, because I totally think that it could bite them in the back as well. I love RPGs, collecting loot, but I also think that it does not really fit in every franchise. When it feels more like a way to simply keep you playing for a long time, a carrot at the end of the stick, then it could feel more exhausting than entertaining. I would argue that for Assassin's Creed and for Odyssey, I actually like the gear system a lot and collecting new loot, also because AC is set in a historical time period. So it's really cool to get the gear and the armor and the weapons that you would expect from that period. And you also have way more melee focused and even ability focused combat. But yeah, not sure if it's a good trend for all of the Ubisoft games, but time will tell. Let's go back to Mike Laidlaw, because he has been walking around E3 with someone else, like most of the times from the looks of it, as we see many pictures of him with Jeff Skulski. And he is a senior producer at Ubisoft Quebec who worked on Assassin's Creed Syndicate and a ton of other RPG games, including Mass Effect, as we see in his Twitter bio. No Odyssey in his bio, Gods and Monsters are also not there. So he's also doing something else, something secret at Ubisoft Quebec, and likely with Mike Laidlaw. Again, the two have mostly been walking around E3 together from the looks of it, and there are just not a lot of other people to work with at Ubisoft Quebec, because most people are working on Gods and Monsters. In December 2016, Jeff mentioned in a LinkedIn article about why he moved to Quebec that he was hired to grow a second core team there, which is what I'm doing right now, and he likely still is doing at this moment. So the Odyssey team that is now working on Gods and Monsters is the first core team, you would think. And there's actually a second core team as well, already growing for the last 2 years. And it's of course very likely that Mike Laidlaw is part of this second team as well. When I first heard the news that Mike Laidlaw would go to Ubisoft Quebec, I first always thought that he would make his own new IP, a brand new open world AAA RPG. Because that must be the dream for every developer, right? To be the boss over your own new IP. And that would totally fall in line with the line where he talked about the fact that this opportunity was so exciting that it made him move across the country. It's still possible, of course, that he and his team are working on their own Dragon Age style fantasy open world RPG, but I just don't see Ubisoft do that when Assassin's Creed is going in that direction, and that everything with the Assassin's Creed name on it would of course make way more money. And now that the Odyssey team isn't working on Assassin's Creed, then someone else has to do it. I mean, they made 2 core teams, one in Montreal and one in Quebec. So there's no team in Quebec working on Assassin's Creed. That doesn't really make sense. I still think that this could mean that we will not see a similar back-to-back approach as we saw with Origins, and then the year after that immediately Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But that instead we will see the Assassin's Creed Viking game release, and then 2 years later the next Assassin's Creed instead of immediately in 2021. What I do feel is clear is that the next Assassin's Creed after Assassin's Creed Kingdom from Ashraf Ismail is being made by the Dragon Age veteran, and that will likely mean that we get even more RPG elements and dialogue choices. Curious if after Gods and Monsters the team that is working on that will join Mike Laidlaw on his project, or if they will work on something else. Hard to say, we really can't know. I still thought it was interesting to answer the question that kind of appeared after the announcement of Gods and Monsters. Because Ubisoft wants their Assassin's Creed releases, it's still one of their most popular franchises, and so if the Odyssey team is not working on it, then somebody else must, right? What do you think of this theory and research? Let me of course know your input in the comments down below. I can't wait to read it. Would be awesome if you could leave a like on the video, of course, to show your support. Click the logo to subscribe for everything on the future of Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Check out my previous video on some info regarding the Atlantis DLC episode 3. And I will speak to you next time for now. Goodbye!